How's everybody doing today? I certainly hope you're doing well. I'm going to tell you a story about the nobodies and the somebodies. You see, not too long ago, there was a community. It was a farming community. And about 5,000 nobodies lived in this community. There was a couple of somebodies, but for the most part, this little community was inundated with a bunch of nobodies. Now, there was a big old fair, and everybody's having a good time. Everybody's dancing and carrying on, and they're drinking their beer, and they're hoo-hooing and ha-ha and carrying on. And this one particular nobody, told a couple of other nobodies, said, hey, I have got an idea about how to execute a certain plan to make farming easier, cost-effective, and to, let's say, double our profit. And I'd like to talk to you bunch of nobodies at my place if you didn't mind. So after the dance and after the fair and such, a couple of nobodies went over to this other nobody's house. And this nobody started telling him this information about how they could farm in such a way that would double their profits. It would be cost effective, and it would be easier than what they're doing now. And all the other nobodies, they were so mesmerized by this individual, this nobody that was telling the information to them. When they left that night, a couple of days later, these few nobodies told a bunch of other nobodies and said, man, this is just great. So, needless to say, a couple of days later, the nobody that told all this information was getting inundated with calls. He was getting call after call after call from all these other nobodies he's never met. And these nobodies wanted to know when that nobody was going to have another meeting, because they wanted to hear, they wanted to experience the delivery of the information from this nobody. So that nobody told him, I tell you what, I'm going to have another meeting Saturday afternoon, 4 o'clock. We'll be cooking hot dogs and hamburgers. We'll have beer and pop. We'll have a good time. And then I'll talk to you about all this information, all these ideas that I have. So Saturday rolls around. And instead of having a couple of nobodies, about 50 nobodies show up. Because they want to hear this information. Not only do they want to hear the information at hand, but they want to see and experience the execution of this information from this nobody. So Saturday runs around, and all these nobodies show up. He's like, wow, we went from a couple of nobodies to like tens of nobodies. It's awesome. So he stood in the barn there so everybody could hear him. He stood up on like a wooden box there so it would project his voice out. And he was telling these other nobodies the information and his ideas about how they could double the profits. And how that they could farm in such a way that would be cost effective and so on and so forth. And again, all these nobodies were so mesmerized by the way he delivered the information. And see, a lot of these nobodies, they knew about this information. They've heard about this information through the grapevine. But see, they didn't care about that. They really were sitting on the edge of their chair, listening to every syllable that this nobody was projecting at them, because he did it in such a way that was in the entertainment area. And plus he was speaking the same language as them. So all those nobodies left, and before you know it, he was getting calls from all these other nobodies asking him, when are you going to have another meeting? Because again, the other nobodies told all the nobodies about this nobody that had a great way of delivering the information, had a great way of delivering these ideas. So once again, this nobody was getting calls. He was getting calls from nobodies from all walks of life because they too wanted to experience what this nobody had to say. So this nobody said, you know, I'm going to have a meeting on Saturday afternoon, 4 o'clock. We're going to cook hot dogs and hamburgers. We're going to have beer and pop. And if you want to come, please do. Well, the word got out. And before you knew it, thousands of nobodies showed up. Thousands. He couldn't believe his eyes. He was expecting maybe 100 nobodies. But no, it was thousands of nobodies showed up. So he was quite impressed with that. So somebody had to run back to town. Somebody had to get, you know, speakers and a megaphone or some type of electronic device so that way all the nobodies could hear this nobody speak. So they went back to town. They got this equipment, got big speakers. They put them on top of the barn so that way every word that this nobody said, all the other nobodies could hear what he was saying. And again, all of these nobodies, as they were absorbing the information, you know, they all amongst themselves, all the nobodies kind of got together that day and they said, you know something, we're going to make this nobody a somebody. This nobody is going to be maybe not voted as a somebody, but become a somebody because of all the nobodies by circumstance. So now this somebody who newly elected somebody, he really liked being a somebody because all of his life as a child, he was told by his parents, don't you want to be somebody in life? Yes, I do. And he worked most of his life to be there. And just all of a sudden, because of his information in which he presented, the way he presented it, his ideas, the way he presented his ideas, people loved it. They couldn't get enough. So this somebody is now somebody. But he is a somebody because all the other nobodies made him a somebody. So all these other nobodies are saying, hey, can you give us some more ideas? Can you think of maybe some other ideas on how we can help ourselves and how we can promote farming in such a, let's say, environmentally friendly, cost-effective way? You know, maybe split the time in half, that sort of thing. So that somebody, that newly elected somebody, stated, yes, I will think about it, and I will speak next week. So before you knew it, outside of that town, the somebodies that really matter got wind about this newly elected somebody, and they wanted to pervert this individual. They wanted to bring this newly appointed or newly elected somebody under their wing so that somehow they could pervert them with the somebody way of life. The somebody way of life that really matters. Because after all, if you're not making really good money, and if you don't have a nice house, and if you don't have a good political standing, and if you don't have a great social standing, then you're a nobody. But they were going to show him and pervert him into the somebody status. And let me tell you something right now. That newly appointed, that newly elected somebody, he loved the way the somebody smelled. He loved the way the somebody tasted. He loved the experience of being a somebody. So he was getting calls. He was getting calls to break away from the 5,000 nobody community. But now he's the newly appointed somebody. And come on over to the somebody side, where being somebody really matters. So he was to speak again at that Saturday, knowing that thousands, maybe even 5,000 of all the nobodies would show up. So they got all the speakers, they put them on the barn, and they cooked a bunch of hot dogs and hamburgers, and all the nobodies showed up to listen to this newly appointed somebody speak. But you see, before he could speak, a couple of the nobodies, they had a little problems with maybe some of the ideas that the newly appointed somebody had said the week before, and they were discussing it. So they started asking the newly appointed somebody these questions, and they started punching holes in his ideas. So what did that somebody do? Did that somebody listen to the nobodies that had these questions? No. You see, that somebody used somebody tactics to shut up the nobodies. So the nobodies said to him, now hold on a second. You're a somebody because we created you into a somebody. How could you dare, how could you have the audacity to talk to us nobodies like that? Have you lost your nobody upbringing? And then somebody said, you know, I will sue you for slander. I will sue you and use somebody tactics to silence you if need. So all the nobodies, they backed up because they were afraid of the somebody laws. They were afraid of the somebody tactics. So they backed up and they were silent. Here's the point to this whole story. When we're born and we're a little bitty baby, we have no voice. We have some sort of communication, maybe crying or wah 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 or whatever kind of speech that may be, because we haven't been taught to be somebody yet. We are a nobody because we have no voice. We may have a voice, but it's not coherent to all the nobodies and the somebodies of life. When we become teenagers, when we become, let's say, early adults, we are taught to be somebody. And that somebody has been perverted. People believe that in the case that you want to be somebody, you have to have a nice house, and you have to have a nice car, and you have to have money in the bank, and you have to have some type of political or social standing in order to be somebody. That's not true. It is not true. It's nonsense. It's horseshit. Because even if you become a somebody, you had to be a nobody first. You had to be. You can't be somebody without being a nobody first. It is impossible. However, when the people become somebody, they use somebody tactics to silence the nobodies. But here's the funny thing. When people get of old age and they have a hard time walking, and they have a hard time speaking, and they have a hard time thinking and remembering things, and when they're creeping on death because of old age or whatever it may be, once again, they become a nobody. I'm Mr. Nobody. And if you're nobody, you're somebody to me. Good day.